Welcome to Don't Be Blinded by False Leadership Light and Forfeit Your New Illuminate Leadership Calling. This is with the new Leadership Light Illuminators, AliNICOLE, wow, and that's me, and Gina Gardiner, and Brenda Jacobson. And this is actually a companion call to Blinded by False Leadership Light Illumination and the Rise of New Light Illumination Women Leaders, which actually was our first preview call for the new Illumination Leadership Light Shine Forth Now. That's going to be a virtual conversational training conference that the three of us are going to be facilitating. And there's actually a link below in the description for you to listen or re-listen if you had the opportunity to that particular segment. And before I bring Gina and Brenda forward, I'm going to provide some of the main focuses for our conversational training conference that's coming up. We're very excited about this. So a few of the core areas that are going to be covered, I'm going to do an opening training on new leadership light on Damascus Road. And it actually is inspired by one of my publications. And I'm going to be sharing some excerpts from that publication during this particular call that we're having. And Brenda is going to be bringing forth a mini talk. And that mini talk is going to be on awakening your new luminous leadership light and unleashing your magic in the world. And Gina is going to be doing a mini talk on the enlightened soul mission blueprint of a new illumination leader. And then I'm going to provide sort of a mini keynote called Rise, Lead, and Shine Forth as a new Illuminate leader. And so again, we're really excited to bring this nature of a conversational training conference to you because it is very needed during these times. So in today's conversation, we're going to be focusing on the three blind mice ripple effect of false light leadership, and also unbind and unblind yourself and trust the new Illuminate leadership path. And then we're also going to be talking about positioning your leadership light to prosper in a holistic way and make an impact. So got a great conversation lined up. And I just want to welcome and also thank both Gina and Brenda for once again being with me here.
Oh, thanks so much. It's a real pleasure, and it couldn't be more timely. There's so much going on, and people really need to understand what they're going through and the part they have to play in the future.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. That was well stated right there. And we certainly can have some conversation around that for sure. Brenda, thank you.
You're very welcome. I always enjoy being here with both Gina and AliNICOLE. It's, this is such vital work that we're bringing forth and very timely. It's almost, there's almost a sense of urgency to it because the world is changing so dramatically. We're going to see it change so much in the next few months, by the end of the year. And the skills that leaders have worked so hard to develop in the past just aren't going to be as relevant going forward.
Right.
A new level of proficiency, a new level of skills that have never been available to lead for this, that are actually going to be critical to their productivity and profitability.
Absolutely.
So I'm just feeling really thrilled to be a part of bringing this through to those leaders and helping them level up their skills into this new world. So
right.
You guys doing this. I think that the three of us, the different dimensions that we bring to this really enhance the richness of the training that we're delivering here. So
absolutely. Oh, I couldn't agree more. Such a great way to actually start this conversational training, so to speak, is really by focusing on those aspects that you both mentioned about the timeliness and the urgency, and also what's going to be the new relevance around these different contexts, for sure. Were you going to say something, Gina?
Well, no, other than that, there is no time now to sit on your laurels, and people who are actually going to rely on what has so far got them through, I think are going to find themselves hitting a brick wall.
Very much
because
so.
Unless their trajectory is over the wall and really soaring high, they are going to be left behind. And
yes,
I think it's so sad because there are many people who have got such potential, but potential doesn't mean anything unless you actually fulfill it.
That's right.
So it's the difference, I suppose, between, you can go to the supermarket and buy half a dozen eggs, and they have actually no potential to become chickens or ducks.
Right.
Because they've not been fertilized and they've not been incubated. And so there are many people out there who are making the assumption that they're going to fly like an eagle, but actually it's going to be much more like them sitting on the supermarket shelf in a cardboard box going nowhere.
Right, with the one-time usage. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we're actually going to talk
I like that metaphor.
more about that. Yeah, that was a perfect analogy for sure. A perfect analogy for sure. And there's such danger. And I know that's probably a strong word to use, but I feel it's appropriate because of the timings, that we're in, is that there's a danger to this type of mentality or leadership position, because what happens is as these leaders start to expire, it's a good thing in terms of the progression of humanity's evolution, especially if they won't shift. But what happens is the others who have participated with them and leveled up in a sense, or they'll level out, with them as well. And that actually leads me into talking about the three blind mice ripple effect of false leadership light. And so I'm going to kind of give a context around this, and then we can, have further discussion, for sure. So when a false light leader or an influencer, and they try to make an impact on others with the false light, then what happens, it starts to ripple out 3 or more times with more of the same of the blind leading the blind, or influencing, the blind. And ultimately, it is actually a terrorist act against oneself and others, but also the greater divine plan. So here we have, there's the leader, there's the people that the leaders make their impact on, and then there's the ones that they will go out and influence. So it's that 3 blind mice effect. The blind leads the blind, and then that blind goes out and leads more blind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes perfect sense. And particularly now, when so many people are living in fear and they are really looking for somebody to lead them out of the darkness, that if they are then, if they are already under duress and they are looking for someone else to give them a lead, if that lead is a false one, then it is a double whammy, isn't it?
Right. Absolutely. It is a triple whammy in a sense, right? Because it has that threefold, and then it continues because, like I said, there's the leader or concept or so itself. And then the group of individuals that they are, like I said, making the impact on and influencing with that false light. And then those others who got the influence are going to turn around, and I just will just plain out say it, infect others with that virus.
Yeah, it's definitely that trickle down effect, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It ripples out and it doesn't stop. That's the thing. I just used the premise of the three blind mice. It's kind of a threefold that sets it up, but it just continues. It continues. It continues. But what's going to start happening is with the new light that's coming forth, it will start to overtake that false light. But in the meantime, as that is progressing and the new light, a new illumination is ensuing, what starts to happen is that you've got more people going down that really is unfortunate because they don't have to. But what we're bringing to the table gives them an opportunity to turn ship now, because everybody who still actually hasn't already turned ship in a sense and started having their wake-up calls, they're going to be faced with consequences regardless, but there's still an opportunity to redeem and not become the egg on the shelf with the one-time usage of becoming irrelevant.
Right. And I think that what we're going to see is kind of a self screening of these companies, because the companies that are moving forward on that old style leadership will not be successful.
No,
they will die out.
Oh, absolutely.
And it'll be the painful way, as we said on our other thing, that this evolution is not optional. This evolution is mandatory. The suffering from it is optional.
Is the option, right?
They will suffer, and they will eventually have to come around if they're staying in that business world. But we will see the failure of businesses based on that old technology that they're using.
Yeah. And just and not just with companies, just in general, any framework that is not leveling up in the newer expansion, the newer context are going to crumble, because the newer light in leadership and just the evolutionary expansion is going to overtake the old. And that just has to be. But like we said, as that's happening, there's going to be a lot, and it's unfortunate that it's going to be several who really go down with that, and some will not actually be able to recover. And that's why we're having the calls and doing the conference around this context, is that you have to step into this new illumination, which actually I can start to segue into kind of the next phase of what we can have a discussion around. But before I move forward to that, Gina, did you have anything else that you wanted to add, or should I just move forward?
I think just to say that I think people who consider themselves leaders have an absolute responsibility to the people that they lead and the people that those influence. And what concerns me is the number of people who actually ought to know better.
Right.
Seem
I agree.
Caught in the trap. And the trap of believing the negativity, the hype, the being so intransigent about they are right, and that they are leading people in a way that's going to cause huge distress and damage.
Right.
And I think people can look to themselves and ask themselves those direct questions. Am I following the light? Am I following a false light?
Right.
And start to give themselves an opportunity to really take a long, hard look at themselves and what they're doing. And to check in with themselves. I think some of them are so gung-ho about what they're shouting about,
right,
that they've lost sight of
they've lost total connection. And that's something I'm going to share even within the excerpts from New Leadership Light on Damascus Road, and also within the previous call. We talked a lot about that, and also to the groups that a primary group that's going to be eliminated from being able to participate in this new illumination. And so we really are here to be able to provide something for others to start making those shifts, as I mentioned earlier, is so that they don't forfeit their opportunity to be a part of what they were really divinely designed to be in leadership. And so I'll go ahead and start talking about unbind and unblind yourself and trust the new illumination leadership path. And this is really important, and something I do want to say, going back to what Gina said about you witness those who should know better. And that's why I mentioned that if people haven't already turned before this point, they're going to have consequences regardless and fallout, because there are major lessons is that you should have been prepared enough not to be going down this road. And so now you're going to have to look and examine, just as Gina said, why is this? Why did you choose this path? How did you get sucked into that, or willingly go and participate? So like I said, it's going to be interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and start actually sharing an excerpt from my soon to be released publication, New Leadership Light on Damascus Road, an Illuminate Awakening Journey, Journal for Repositioning Your Leadership Light, Mission, and Agenda. And what I'm going to be sharing is from a section that's called From Bashing to Bowing. And here we go. So be careful who you bash. The one you bash today might be the one you have to bow down to tomorrow. Ask the Apostle Paul. Sometimes leaders and influential people think that they are on the right track and even qualified to tear down another leader or movement who actually might be in place to carry out a divine plan that no longer is serving the current agenda. Several are about to get a divine wake-up call when new light leadership hits them on Damascus Road to open up blinded eyes. Saul, who later became the Apostle Paul, thought he was doing the right thing in his misguided mission of being aligned with agendas that wanted to remain in control and preserve the old when the new divine order was being put in place. When he got hit with the truth, he had to submit to the one whom he was bashing. So believe it or not, some are about to bow to whom they are bashing, and it's all part of the divine plan. They can resist all they want and think that there will be another way. However, blinded eyes can't be opened until they accept the truth they believe just might not be the real gospel. Something to think about here. Saul / Paul, again, thought he was doing God's will, but what form of God was he following? He was doing the will of a movement that leveraged the name of God to gain religious control and kill off the new divine order that was underway. You couldn't tell Saul that he had it wrong because he strongly believed that his movement had it right. Until he was hit with the light of truth, he didn't realize how blind that he was. The good news is that his eyes were able to be opened, and he could rise to become the true leader that he was destined to be. New Leadership Light on Damascus Road delivered him from his biases of falsehood. He didn't lose his destiny because he made the required shifts and got set on the right path, and he had to bow down again to the one that he was bashing. So some are about to lose their places of influence and be replaced with those who are already in the new light, who will lead in truth that's not based on bias, but on divine will. Until others' eyes are open to the truth and they make shifts, you're about to witness the fall of so-called Goliaths. As you watch them fall overnight, you will also see those who have to come back around and publicly admit they were misleading others according to their biases and didn't realize that they didn't have all of the facts or truth about what was emerging and unfolding for the highest and best good of all. Of course, there will be those who will resist. However, they will lose out big time in the end. A new era of leadership is required so that others aren't blinded by false light. Again, Saul/Paul thought he was doing the will of God and didn't realize it was a God created in the image of religious control who created conspiracies to make sure that others think bad about the ones who were divinely sent to bring about the new purpose of God. Don't be blinded by false callings of influencers who believe that they are put in place to demonize what they will later discover was divine. New illumination leaders don't have to bash or fall out of alignment to make a stand, to prove their point, or preserve their views. Fear of bias annihilation is what's really going on. They're so afraid of losing their grip on old crumbling systems. I'm so glad that Saul, again, later became Apostle Paul, woke up to see what was truly taking place and didn't forfeit the divine plan for his true leadership calling. So many can learn from his leadership if they're open to it. Regardless, they will learn either way, whether it be with least resistance or be hit with the new light on Damascus Road. So that's one excerpt. I do have another. Should I go ahead and share the other? I know it's pretty lengthy. Should I go ahead and share the other and we have a collective discussion around?
I think that makes sense, yeah, to
Okay.
do the two
and then we have a
we'll
collective discussion. Okay, we'll do that. So this comes from the section that's called The Dark Light of the Soul Leadership Shift into New Soul's Illumination Leadership Light. So most are familiar with the concept called the dark night of the soul. I coined it several years ago as the soul's illumination journey. This is where an individual enters into a sacred time of transition of death to rebirth within an inner transformation process. The death of the lower ego's agenda to rebirth the authentic soul's purpose. This process reveals the inner truth about a person's fears, unhealed wounds, unrefined character, and also their greater potential. There's also a process of what I call the dark light of the soul, which later reveals within a person the lack of true transformation, metamorphosis, and evolution at a deeper level that would be required to support the new emerging light of the relevant divine plan. This is a faulty premise of false light leadership callings. We see this so much in today's leadership. This occurs when leaders have gone through traditional transformation processes over the years only to misinterpret their soul's purpose due to confirmation bias, conspiracy theories, and their unresolved inner issues. As a result, they call themselves to positions and roles that they believe are divine callings. They shine forth false leadership light in their missions, believing that they are carrying the truth and the light. Saul, who later became the Apostle Paul, was one of those false light leaders who thought his calling was a divine one. His religious and political stance were misaligned. Though he had been successfully prepared in skill in several disciplines such as leadership in religious movements, politics, and a passion to serve, he only developed into one who would eventually rise to be influential only to be on the wrong path of falling into a false leadership light calling. Again, This is the same with so many leaders and people of influence today, especially in the present. So many are trying to make their voices heard and take their stand against certain areas they believe to be wrong. They've successfully prepared in personal and professional development. However, they didn't do the deep soul work that the soul's illumination or dark night of the soul process provides. Instead, they developed the dark light of their soul, which is now playing out in huge ways and revealing the truth of who they are as it relates to carrying out the ego's agenda to keep the new light from breaking forth. The great news about Apostle Paul is that he had a turnaround from his blindness to his false leadership light calling and made the shift into his new soul's illumination leadership light calling. This is what will happen for so many other leaders who are currently following their false leadership light callings. They're going to have a wake-up call with the new leadership light on Damascus Road. This is the journey that will bring them into the truth and cause them to do the accelerated inner work that the traditional self-help, self-improvement, self-empowerment, or outdated religious or spiritual frameworks don't provide. This journey will awaken them to their new leadership light calling and so much more. So the shift is here. No more dark light of the soul callings. It's time for the new soul's illumination, leadership light. So I know that was a lot that was shared, but I believe that it's the best context and premise that we can spring forth from to have a more rich conversation before we move into the third section. So definitely would love to hear from both of you around just your thoughts.
Do you want to go first, Brenda, or do you want me to?
So Gina, let's hear from you.
Okay. One of the things that I've been noticing hugely is how many people who are powerful leaders who have got caught up in the whole business of fear and separation, and if I'm right, I have to make you wrong. Mm-hmm. And holding on to, as you know, the theories you talked about, conspiracy, for example, and the polarization of people, that you're either with me or you're against me. And what struck me is, if you think about illumination, for me, one of the most powerful things about illumination is the vibration of light.
Yes.
And that I believe that leaders of the now, of the new iteration, the new illumination, is about holding the high illuminated space.
Yes,
it is about vibrating from a place of love, and I don't mean pink and fluffy love.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking about a love where you have high expectations, and you always start with self and exactly the behaviors and the language that you want from other people. So if you haven't done the deep dive work, and all around you there are people who are clamoring and who are making loud noises, it's very easy to get caught up in that. But I believe the role of the new leader, at least a significant part of that role, is to be able to hold the light space.
Yes.
Of coming from a place of love, of forgiveness, of gratitude, of joy, of calm.
Unification.
Absolutely. There is no division. I mean, we've talked before, haven't we, about...
Yes.
There is no division. Whatever I do, I am connected to you. We are all children of God. We are the divine spark on this earth.
Right.
So when we defile somebody, when we vilify somebody else, we are doing it to ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything other people say, but there's a difference between acknowledging that other people have a view, and what you're seeing at the moment is this really vitriolic way that people start to behave towards one another.
Good point. Right.
It's so infectious. You talked about use the word infect others. And it's like a cancer.
Very
It
much.
spreads quickly, it's destructive, it sucks the very life out of people, and it certainly sucks the light out of people.
Right.
And I've noticed many people who I know who are incredibly talented, gifted leaders who think that they're in the light,
right,
are focusing on and talking about how other people are doing this and they're not doing that, and getting caught up in, it's more than gossip, but getting caught up in that energy of, look at what they're doing and that's wrong, rather than whatever's going on around me, I am going to hold this space for myself and others. I recognize that there is chaos going on and there's a reason for that.
Right.
I'm not going to get dragged down into the mire. I am going to hold that space and I'm going to shine my light so other people can come and gather within that safe space of
That's
the light.
Right.
And it saddens me to see people who have a really strong sense of purpose,
right,
who want to do good in the world, who are actually worshipping this false god.
Yes, they are.
And as a result, they are going to be tainted by it, and they
Right.
will never, unless they change, they will never fulfill their potential.
You're absolutely right. I want to say something really quick, because what I find to be extremely interesting too is that when you see others who are, as going back to the chapter about, bashing, from bashing to bow, is when you see others who are doing the bashing, it's interesting, they'll bash another, but they'll excuse whom they're following. They'll excuse all of the things that they've done. So it's kind of what do they call it, a double standard, is that we'll dismiss the behavior of whom we believe is a chosen one or someone who should be leading, but we'll demonize this other. And that's why there's going to be some huge lessons that come out. And the reason why the Damascus Road vibration has to be really instated, if you will, during these times, is because that's the only way that leaders are going to get the wake-up calls and start to unbind themselves and unblind themselves. Because if you're following what you believe to be the true light, so to speak, and you don't even recognize that you're in false light, at this point you have no business being in leadership, and that's going to play out for sure. You have no business being in leadership, but you don't even realize that you're bound and gagged at the same time, that you've been taken to the cleaners and you don't even know your pants are down.
No. And I think it's that blindness, even in the brightest light, that they are blind to not only what others are doing, but also blind to
the new light.
More so in a way, but also blind to how what seemingly small acts of indiscretion or acts of whatever the opposite of integrity may be. The lack of truth, the lack of honesty, not recognizing that each one of those small acts like another nail in the coffin.
It does. Yeah. Not even realizing you're doing yourself in, which is something we talked about. Brenda, we love to hear from you.
Sure. Man, you ladies have said it all. I think I totally agree with everything that you've said. And you've taken it to such a pure vibration. I think that there's so many leaders out there that are deer in the headlights. Like they know at a deep level that the way they're going is not the right way, but they don't see another road out of it. And those are the ones that I think are going to be the first ones that will change their ways and lead the pack into this new way of leading, this new vibration. But there's just so many of them that there's so much fear out there. There's so much disruption. The world is changing at a pace that people just are really struggling to keep up with. Yeah. And on every level of life, things are changing. And, that old negative leadership is pulling out all stops to hold on to their control of the future. And it's a lost cause, but it is causing a lot of disruption in that leadership field, in with businesses and entrepreneurs and leaders in every realm, are kind of caught between this struggle of the world evolving, whether we like it or not, and the old leadership holding on and digging in and trying to hold on to the old way. And, I love that we're bringing this training forward because it gives leaders an option. It gives them a light to follow at the end of the tunnel, where up until this point, there has been nothing for them out there. Right.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You brought up a very significant point for sure, is that there are those, like you said, who they just don't know another way, at this point. And inwardly, they're trying to consciously choose not to go down that road, but because they aren't sure what to do next, and they need a breakaway, so to speak. But even leading up to that, they have to be even more courageous and intentional in terms of just saying, I may not know the way to go right now, but I'm not going to choose to go down this road. And sometimes that is the crossroad, that is the juncture where people have to make a decision. I don't know the next steps, but I know that right here, right now, this isn't it. And this isn't it. Yeah. No matter how long I've been on this road or been doing this, it comes to this point where, as Gina mentioned about the integrity, and you get to that point and say, no, this is not in alignment, and I just can't, progress moving forward. And that is where the Damascus Road, the new leadership light on Damascus Road, can bring that illumination to one and say, listen, this is where you start to make your shifts and start to level up and reposition yourself, because you got to regroup at this point. Because if you've gotten to this point where the light has to hit you, there's a reason why that light had to hit, and you do have to deal with that initially of why that was, but then be able to accelerate the process to start moving forward into the new light, like the Apostle Paul, or Saul again turned into the Apostle Paul, which later, I say turned in, which later became, the Apostle Paul had that 3-day blinding experience where Ananias had to come and open up his eyes in a sense, but that was an accelerated process. But he got it and anchored it during that time of, wow, okay, I'm on the wrong track here. But what I can do is use my passion, my gifts, and everything that I was doing to serve this misaligned movement. I can now transfer those skills into this new leadership vibration and allow myself to be used. And as Gina said, not be an egg in a carton only to have that one-time usage, but can continue to shine the light continuously. So that was really important that you brought that up, is because that is the shift that's going to be taking place. And the reason why people have to, as I said, at this point, they have to unbind and unblind themselves, is because we are at a time of higher self-accountability, which I'm going to talk a little bit about that within the next part of the segment, so to speak, that we get into, is that people are having to, on some level, wake themselves up, even if it is by the divine disruptions and different things that are occurring, is that they have to unbind themselves. They have to unblind themselves enough so that they can actually receive this new way that's coming forth. Because when you're hit with that truth, it's undeniable. It really doesn't matter what you chose to believe or you didn't believe. Just like what Brenda mentioned about the world and the evolution and the expansion, it is inevitable. It is happening regardless. And you can try to hang on and fight but those who are fighting at this point are going to forfeit. That's just the bottom line. They are going to fall out and forfeit. Those who still have, I would say, kind of the Apostle Paul vibration, those are the ones who can have that turnaround. Those are the ones that Brenda was just mentioning, the ones who are at a juncture. And but also this gives an opportunity even for others who, let's say, aren't going down a false light road. The new leadership light on Damascus Road is really to illuminate for any leader how to get repositioned for the times that we're in, because what served at one point just will not serve moving forward. But what this does do is it does bring the greater illumination, is that all that people have been preparing for, they'll see that those premises or whatever were faulty in terms of what the new world was going to be requiring, with the new expansion. And so those just don't serve. And that's why most are unprepared. Brenda mentioned about things hitting in at a very accelerated way and people don't know what to do. And the reason why they don't know what to do is because some have known what to do to get leveled up, to that point. But why they fell into the bracket that didn't is because, and not maybe for everybody, but for a great majority, is because they needed to have their souls at this point also purged and exposed so that they can see some things about themselves that they didn't realize were still there. And moving forward in this pure light, this pure vibration of leadership, the soul has had to been evolutionized. And if it hasn't, people, even at their best attempts and good intentions, would still be serving out of a false leadership light premise as well, because they would be bringing old paradigm, old structures and confines and frameworks in, trying to bring it into the new, and they want to make that new and improve. And it's like, no, it has to have had a metamorphosis. So that's what we're seeing, is the failure of evolution, the failure of a metamorphosis process. Big caterpillars that have just evolved and grown into big caterpillars, but ultimately have not become a new creation. And that's what this new light leadership, experience in the illumination format is all about. Having you both become something different than you were previous in your leadership.
Absolutely.
Understatement, right? Yeah.
It's a continual, it's a dynamic process.
Yes.
It's not a once and done thing. It's not like you make a change today and you go, phew, I'm there.
No,
the world is changing rapidly and will continue to change rapidly.
Right.
And
in
leadership
fact, that's just
skills,
the beginning, right?
Leadership skills will continue to evolve.
Right.
And if you don't jump on this new wave now, you're going to be way behind. It is going to be a challenge to catch up
almost
with
impossible.
the evolution. Yes.
Yes, almost impossible, because humanity at large, and you all have heard me talk about this in several trainings or processes that you've been through, even with me, is how far behind even the evolved are. And when there's that level of behindness, and trying to, if you want to call it, close the gap, so to speak, to catch up and sync up in that evolution. And by the time people actually sync up enough, again, the journey is just starting. And that's the other part of the revelation that comes forth in the illumination, is that, as Brenda said, it's not a once and done. You don't get here and you've arrived. Actually, when you reach the juncture where you have synced up enough in the evolution, that's just the new journey that's starting. And now you've got to learn the new way of life and leadership in this new format. And that starts another journey. And so this is a very expansive process, because we've never been here before in history. So when we've never been here before in history, you can't really reference the what wasness of the old world, because the new world provides new information, and it provides a new context for what that particular trajectory entails. And with that being said, the skill up and the level up in this type of process, like it's very different. It's a very nonlinear format, but it is one that you, from a soul perspective, you have got to be, if we want to say right, so to speak, you have got to be aligned with the higher authentic intention of the soul and not the lower vibration of the egos. And that's even for people who are still trying to heal themselves on certain levels, go through inner work on those old frameworks. That type of work is not going to support what is required for these shifts. So I probably better move forward into the next one, right?
Yeah.
Gina, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before we move forward?
No, I think that it's probably better for us to move on.
Yes. Okay, great. All right. So we'll talk quickly about positioning your leadership light to prosper in a holistic way and make a huge impact. So this is the time where leaders really should be focusing on developing their best self and leveling up their leadership light. And they have to do this under the new order to transform and evolve versus following what we've talked about, the traditional personal and professional development processes, because we can see that those have just failed completely, for individuals. And something we talked about in the last call, I had mentioned about this was the time where leaders primarily had to start shifting from trying to be these saviors and these enablers and doing all the blaming and I just call it sort of casting, blame casting in a sense. They have to shift from that, and people have to start looking at themselves for a new illumination. And this is all about self-responsibility, self-accountability, and I mentioned about source reliability. And so it's really interesting because this is the time where, if we want to call it, the real inner and outer work must begin. And it's going to have to be in a more intentional, but not only intentional, a more evolutionary way. This is really about achieving wholeness. And so it's interesting why, while the world is in what seems to be chaos, turmoil, different aspects of contrast, people are focused on everything but what's most important. And who they can only be responsible for is themselves, right? So, so even the people you're bashing and you think that you can't be responsible for what they do, make sure that you aren't missing the boat while you're trying to, cast a stone at someone else. You make sure that your stuff is in alignment, as well. And something that we've been doing, obviously, as new Illuminate leaders, is that we are here to shine that new light, but we're continuously leveling up our light. So we're looking at the places where we need to make adjustments and shifts and metamorphosize and evolutionize as well. And so we're not here looking at others and saying, oh, this is what they're doing, this wrong, and this all these things. We're doing our inner work and our inner reflection, and also holding the higher space that Gina talked about, so that we can have this frequency where others can be drawn, to, this process. So I want to shift back to, and we'll have a conversation. I want to just shift back real quick to talk about wholeness. What we, the three of us, for sure, we believe in developing the whole of a leader and being able to provide these holistic approaches. And we leverage the right way, the WRITE way, because a lot of the works that we create for others are in these intentional, interactive, journals in many formats. And actually, I'm going to be sharing resources from all three of us that are going to help leaders really start on this new journey of leveling up their life in general, but also their leadership light, so that they can start to position themselves in the right way, so that they can start to prosper and make a huge impact with their missions. So before I actually share the resources, we can definitely have some conversation just around positioning the leadership light to start prospering in a holistic way, because you can't really, at this stage of the game, you can't really make a huge impact if you are not flowing from wholeness and having a holistic approach to life and leadership. Would you both agree?
Absolutely. I think that sorry, Gina, I jumped in there. I think that the foundation of this entire movement has to be built on empathy, not going into judgment for those who have not made this shift, because everybody's struggling with their own challenges and they're all caught up in this web of negativity, and different people will have different skills, different levels of agility and resilience to move out of that. But to be a powerful leader in this new light energy, it has to be based on curiosity and not judgment. It has to be founded on a platform of empathy and understanding. That is the energy. When you bring that forth for people, that's the energy that gets them moving in the right direction. If we approach them through judgment, it's just another one of those fear and contracting energies that they don't want to be part of. It's what they're trying to escape from. So if we can base that on that energy of curiosity and move people forward from there, I think it will be far more successful for leaders.
Well, you do attract more bees with honey. So I'm going to play the devil's advocate a little bit here.
Hey.
Yeah, and then Gina can speak. In this new grid, this new grid is not like the old grid. So it is not interested in the comfortability or even the pace that someone else is on. It is very much a trajectory that here is the new order, and you're either syncing up with this according to the pace of the new movement and the new expansion versus how it has been, where people are kind of at their own, they're doing their things, everybody's on different levels. Yes, it does. How can I say, it does provide the different levels that people are on, but it is according to the new trajectory and really not the old frameworks that keep people. It's not really interested in whether this will attract or draw. It is what it is. And that's why the new light is coming, is because when people are kind of left to themselves a certain way, then they're actually not going to, do the things that are required. And so when this new energy, and you're bringing something up, Brenda, it's like
I always do.
Right. And I actually just posted something just late last night on Facebook, even about slow and steady doesn't always win the race. And I've talked about this, quite a bit. You're making me actually want to go over and pull it up. It's really interesting because and you said something about empathy, and that is true. And the empathic, as we know, us being empathic and highly sensitive and being the ones who are going to be really ushering in this new energy. But at the same time, even the empathic expression comes under a new format and under a new definition for this new world. And so the attractiveness, if you will, is not even so much in the delivery, because the context in terms of what's being provided is that people are ready, and there's certain people who are ready for this, and they're ready, and they know we have to get in it, and they do know that they have to accelerate. So there are times where the urgency, in a sense, has to come forth even from leaders such as us to say, listen, we're showing you that there's another way, but you do have to understand that this new way is not the way of the old. And it does have its own context and its own premise. And there are things that you have to do to sync up, like I said, to sync up with it. But going back to what you mentioned about not being in the judgmental zone and not being in, and which is true, but one thing we do have to make some distinctions and have some discernments is that we within ourselves have to do examination and to make certain judgment calls. It's more like a fruit inspector. If a fruit inspector looked at a particular fruit and just, well, I don't want to judge that. I don't want to say that it's got rotten on this, that. That's not being in the, how can I say, that's not being in truth. And see, when it's about being in truth, you can call out something that is misaligned but because it's in truth. And you can do that without judging. So just like what we're saying about the different leaders who are in the false light. Now, some could say, that's why, let me just go back and say this real quick. That's why we also have to be mindful about different schools of thought that we've learned under the old premise and the old paradigm, because in the new trajectory, there's something different. So the new trajectory may not be looking at that's a judgment or in a bad way, or, good, bad, or different. It is saying, what is the truth of this? And so just like we're talking about false light leadership and new illumination leadership, we have to make some distinctions to say that that's a false way. And so in saying the false way, that may seem like it's saying that's the wrong way. But the new trajectory is the right way to go. Well, in a sense it is. It's because if you're headed down this way and you're going to sink, this way is higher ground. We do have to be able to make some distinctions, even if it does seem like it's a judgment. It's a judgment call versus judging someone. So I'm not saying you're doing that, but I'm saying I'm just making some distinctions here, is that people have to understand as you're transitioning from old thoughts into, even newer, more expanded, illuminated awareness, is that you have to understand the distinctions and make some discernments, that the difference between making a judgment call versus actually judging something.
Very different.
Yeah, they're very different contexts. You know that, but I just wanted to clear that. That's why I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a moment.
Yeah.
And I'm, just playing is that we do have to understand that, but also understand the nature of, of the new expansion. And that's where we're here to actually educate others. And it's been my primary mission, for sure, to educate others on what this new context is. All right. So this new trajectory, the new vibration of the new expansion, this is not about coddling anyone, or, as I mentioned before, coming to someone's level. And we have to be able to, I said, make those distinctions and be discerning and understanding that it's a newer progression. And we have to continuously catch up with this progression, keep evolutionizing within it. But it's not suited to, first of all, be a one size fits all, for sure. But it also is not suited to be on the level that other people are on in terms of when they want to do it. That's the old world, and that's just not how it works here. And going back to what I said about coddling, is that no, this is not, it's just not that type of frequency that is pampering us in these ways. It's a very gentle energy. It's a very free flowing experience. And you both have been experiencing that yourself. It's an easier, lighter way. But within this easier, lighter way of living, being, and leading, it's still not allowing us to then just say, okay, well, I'm just going to do it in this way. Not when we haven't synced up in evolution. And that's where individuals are having to accelerate themselves. That's why the processes that we do are in accelerated formats, to help others start to ground the awareness, expand that awareness so that they can get the new next level comprehension. But if we leave them in those frameworks of, you've got all the time in the world to do this, or you're at this pace, or you're at this level, and you do it, you have to sync up where the energy is, because it's going to actually put you in truth. That's how leaders primarily, but really the world at large, 95% of humanity has played under or performed under their true potential. Why is this? Because those old frameworks have given you these contexts of how you're supposed to do this and and as we can see, those older frameworks have not even caught leaders up to be in the new illumination. So if they haven't caught up to be in the new illumination, doing it on their own time, their own will, according to what they also believe are the best practices, so to speak, again, that doesn't serve in this newer trajectory. It's a very different experience for learning. We are built, especially empaths, we are built and hardwired for this accelerated work. but we too aren't here to lie to people and be false lights either. And to say that, you actually have to like and appreciate this in order to level up. Well, no, if you want to exist and be in this, then you are going to have to follow the progression, which is going to be a much easier aligned way, because it will be the way of truth. So we don't have to really do attraction factor in that case, because people are going to have to sync up. That's the difference between what's optional and what's required. Required doesn't consist of you even resonating with it. If it is what is required to participate, then you have to move into that. So I know Gina probably has something to say around that too. Before I start sharing our resources.
I think for me, one of the most important lessons that I've learned and working with people, getting them to understand, is this almost begins and ends with you.
Yes.
In order to be equipped to have evolved and to transform from a caterpillar rather than from a caterpillar to a bigger caterpillar, into a butterfly and to an eagle, so that you can soar.
Right.
This is about knowing yourself. You talked about, taking self-responsibility, and I talk about taking radical. Responsibility. Holding yourself accountable to the highest standards, and recognizing when you dip below the line, and catching yourself and getting yourself back up above the line as quickly as possible. It is about recognizing your connection to source. And then in the old way, it was about how you could then lead the way for other people. And it was done in a way for many leaders where it was done, it created a dependency model. Right. Where, you can only develop if I take you step by step.
Right.
This, I believe, is very different.
It is.
And what it is I'm going to model for you how I can be as a new enlightened leader. And I'm going to provide you with the tools so that you too can do it for yourself. But you're going to hold yourself responsible.
Right.
You're going to be accountable to yourself. And yes, inevitably there is an accountability to the organization or whatever, but it's a very different premise when it starts with understand what excellence is in the context of what you're doing, and hold yourself accountable to be the best version that you can be of yourself.
Absolutely. And that's what ultimately brings about the wholeness. And I actually went to get the post that I put up that Brenda, thank you, Brenda. So that Brenda brought the trigger, for me to go here. I want to share this before sharing the publications, because we are providing that real inner and external work that others really need to do to hold themselves more accountable and to be more responsible. And ultimately, as we talked about in the last call, to source reliable and relying on the divine, however you want to language that for yourself, being able to have a newer relationship with that context so that you can get the higher level wisdom and insight that's going to be relevant for this new experience. So I mentioned something about the tortoise and the hare. And as we've been talking about, there's no time for delaying, and there's a sense of urgency so that others don't forfeit, by following not just false leadership light, but also faulty premises within themselves, and even school of thoughts that may have served at one point, but they become sort of falsehood as it relates to the new trajectory. And so we are in accelerated times. And when we're in accelerated times, again, that is the call for acceleration. And acceleration for people definitely is at different levels at different times. But whatever the level of acceleration is calling forth from them, they have to be synced up with that. So let me quickly share this. So I put sorry to be the bearer of brutal truths for stallers and delayers, but slow and steady doesn't always win the race when you have a jackrabbit that isn't sleeping on the job. So we can look at the new world in a sense as a jackrabbit. I'm just saying that. In the story of the tortoise and the hare, the tortoise only won because the cocky, arrogant rabbit thought he had the win/race in the bag and could go to sleep and never believed that a slow tortoise would ever outrace him. In reality, the tortoise would have never won if the rabbit didn't take his speed for granted. However, it's not good to leverage the slow and steady wins the race concept if it's being leveraged for procrastination or as a stalling tactic towards your greatness. If you're scared to win and what that could mean, then it's convenient to leverage the slow and steady wins the race theory. Slow and steady doesn't mean put it off and procrastinate. It means that you're continuously moving forward and making up, in a sense, to compensate in ways to accelerate and get what needs to be done. Though life is not about competition or all about competition, we must be mindful never to take opportunities for granted that might involve you being a part of something where you have to be selected over another or vice versa. You have to discern when it's time to take leaps versus baby steps. Slow and steady, in some cases, can be equated to sleeping on the job, like the hare, and taking things for granted as if they will always be there. In a fast-paced moving world, you have to learn how to be still within yourself, balanced, and divinely paced to know when you need to leverage the slow and steady and when you need to be a jackrabbit that accelerates his win and finishes the race and doesn't take an arrogant nap. If you feel that you are a tortoise, then it's time to be one that's on rollerblades or a skateboard. Don't rely on your conditionings or lack of ability to accelerate. Though this might have worked in the past, it will no longer work in this new world that is evolving and expanding. Some people are going to, if not already, miss out on what was meant for them because of comfortability, leveraging the slow and steady as a stall tactic to delay their success, all because they aren't courageous enough to accelerate during the times that are calling forth for no delays in being boss. You might think that you're going to cross the finish line in record time. However, you might be fooling yourself. Opportunities don't sleep. People do. So whether slow or fast pace, there's no time for stalling, sleeping on the job, or taking things for granted. So I bring that up just in light of what we were discussing just a little while ago, is that in terms of judgment or where different people are, is if we don't understand the newer context, in which most don't. So they don't understand that this is just not a progression, so to speak, that is customized and tailored fit, not in these stages, for others to really say, oh, I don't know whether I want to do this. It doesn't seem that you don't get that. It's almost like when the pandemic or so came in, the Corona wasn't interested in whether what you were ready to do or not. Here's what it is. And it did help to set up a new context for starting to help order, a new world. If we look at it from a positive light, so to speak, of how it was used to help reposition, others. And this newer trajectory, though it's not harsh in any way, in a sense, but because people are ascending from density and from the old constructs and frameworks, that's the part that is the hard part. But again, whether it's hard to break away from patterns and start to making these shifts, that has nothing to do with what the actual trajectory is about. And as I said, it's not catering. It's not going to coddle to to individuals. It is here are the different levels of this, but here's what you have to do. And once you get into this, then yes, there may be more flexibility for co-creating and really creating your own world according to your own terms. But you have to do the fundamentals and grasp the new foundations and understanding for what this means. And going back to leadership at this point is that where leaders are today and what we're providing is that in a subtle yet significant and possibly blunt way in some cases, at least for me, this is really not optional. You're going to have to make that choice of sync up, do not forfeit by holding on to false premises, whether you're following false light or not. If you're false light leadership, if you're following false premises that don't serve this new expansion, you're still going to forfeit, even though you may be doing what seems to be everything right. And so bringing this awareness to leaders who are very much needed. We need all hands on deck at this point. But in needing all hands on deck, we need all hands that are aligned, or I should say all lights on deck at this point, all illuminate lights in the truth. And because there is a truth and there is falsehood. Where, again, older paradigms and different schools of thought, they can really mess us up if we get so caught up, within those frameworks to understand sometimes there is a call. This is the way, this is not the way. And that's what we are providing, because if not, otherwise then we shouldn't even be talking about what we're talking about if there is not a such thing as a false light or false hope for people. But that, again, that's not what we are bringing to the table. So as we start positioning and helping to reposition leaders to level up in this way, I'm going to go ahead and share our publications, what we have to offer. And then what can happen, we can have some final discussion, and then Gina will, have you to close us out. So what we are providing during this time, in addition to the conference that's coming up, is we really want to invite others to start leveling up their leadership light and using it's not really new for us, so to speak, but it is becoming more of the newer way to do the inner work correctly. And so we publish, as I mentioned before, in intentional interactive journal formats. And though journaling isn't new, but it's the way it's used and leveraged in this context to be more of an evolutionary experience. And for a leader, this is very important to do the inner work. And when I say the inner work is not just about going in to heal and all those different things. The inner work is just bringing forth that which is true about you. It's bringing forth the treasures that are within you. And really, when you're doing this, you're bringing forth your new light. And sometimes as you're bringing forth your new light, you do have to sort of kick out, or the process will, that which is no longer true for you, even if it was great, at some point. So I'm going to share resources from Gina at this moment. And one of her resources is It's Time to Become a Beacon of Light and Hope, How to Become an Illuminate Enlightened Leader and Light the Way in Challenging Times. So this is a great resource to have, because if you're being the light during dark times, you're going to be able to bring others into their new light and help them to navigate the process. But you can't be a beacon of light and hope if you are not holding the higher light. So again, this is an illumination resource that will help you in your enlightened leadership journey. And the second one is Enlightened Emerging Leadership, an intentional journal and planner to support your development as an enlightened leader. And then the next one is Enlightened authentic leadership, how to lead yourself and others more authentically and effectively. And again, this is an intentional journal and action planner for leaderpreneurs. And this is very important because as I was talking about the process of going through the dark light of the soul, so to speak, and into this new illumination, it is as the traditional format of the dark night of the soul is that time where others are going through that transition of death to rebirth and the lower ego aspect and partnering with the higher soul's authentic purpose, or if we want to call it the higher ego, because ego is not all bad. It's just that there are certain aspects of it that don't serve the greater expansion. And so this is going to be vital for a leader to bring forth the new light of authenticity so that the truth of you can shine in that way, and then invite others to be able to do the same. And so then we have resources from Brenda. And as we talked about, this is a time of accelerating. And Brenda's primary work is really about helping leaders, empaths, and just individuals in general awaken more consciously, in their journey as they are ascending. And it's time to be accelerated. So her resource, Prepare for Your Accelerated Awakening, shifting from resisting to responsibility for your higher purpose in the new world. And that is important in the new world. And then she has a 30-day wake-up call, and it's a mini course and a workbook for your awakening journey. And also Gina contributed the forward to that work. And also the resource I mentioned first for Gina, It's Time to Be a Beacon of Light and Hope. I contributed the forward to that one. So as you can see, we work together in what we do. Also, something that's very important, this is a resource that's very vital from Brenda, is when leaders are needing to do the deeper dive and enter that inner work on really healing. Self-care is an extreme essential part of being whole. And as we talked about, positioning yourself to prosper in a very holistic way so that you can make your impact. Well, she has the basics of harnessing your chakra power. And this is for empaths, but the world is primarily going to be opening up to their empathic encoding. And that's a whole nother training. But this will serve any and everyone, and especially leaders during this time. And it's a meditation journey through the chakras. So it's very important to level up your well-being, because when you have the chakras aligned, then you're going to be more illuminate and be more whole, for sure. So that's a very important resource. And before closing, if Brenda wants to speak to any of that after I share, then definitely can, for sure. So we'll move into my publications, and I have several, and I'm going to explain why we're sharing all of these and why they actually are vital. So one of my publications is New Light and New Hope. It's a motivational Q&A journal for new era Illuminate leadership. And then the next one, which Gina contributed to, it's called Lighting the Shore, Leading the New Way, an entrepreneurial leadership creation journal for designing an Illuminate impact agenda. Then I have another one that's called Becoming an Illuminate Abundant Leader. It's an inner game mastery mini journal guide for empowering abundant leadership. Again, we're trying to bring in this holistic experience for you to prosper at various levels. So that's why we have an abundance of resources that we are sharing. I have a few more that I'm going to share. The Invisible to Illuminate Branding Factor. how to take your brand visibility from obscurity to obvious. And that's a journal planner. And that's really important because if you're a leader, then your mission and your movement definitely has a brand. You are a brand. And if you don't feel that you're part of the newer light at this point, in terms of in expression and demonstration and making an impact with it, then that means that you're still hidden somewhere, and it's time to shift from being invisible to being illuminate. And so sometimes it's going to be within your branding, and having to make some adjustments or evolutions within that, so you're visible, within the right way. Another one is the burning bush branding effect: how to create Illuminate brand visibility for wisdom leaders and entrepreneurs. So it's all about the illumination, at this time. And then one more I'll share is consciously going for the gold as a transformational leader. This is a mini wisdom planner guide for achieving golden success in lifestyle and leadership. And this one is really important. It actually speaks to the dark night of the soul aspect and provides context for transformational leaders to really start leveling up in a way to become more illuminate within a golden era, golden age perspective. And this particular resource is very important as it relates to the illumination, is because you want to be able to shine your wisdom forth in this golden lifestyle and leadership way, because it is all about being able to be a demonstration before others and being consciously awake and aware as you are going through this process for yourself. Because obviously, when you do it for yourself, you're going to be able to make an impact on others. And then I have some forthcoming works that are coming out. And that is the new Illuminate Leadership Light Factor. It's lighting the shore and leading the new way as an evolutionary lighthouse leaderpreneur. And it is a journal. And then there's the new Leadership Light on Damascus Road, an Illuminate Awakening journey journal for repositioning your leadership light, mission, and agenda. So I just wanted to share those, all of what we've shared today in terms of these resources, and also about the upcoming virtual conversational training conference. And then also information about the three of us is going to be below within the description. So this has been great to be with you both again to talk about an extremely vital and important topic. So we can have some short discussion and then final thoughts, and then Gina will have you to close us out. So Brenda, we'll start with you. Do you have anything that you want to share or add?
I think that the combination of these publications that you listed out there is an escalation in the evolution just by itself, just through those really powerful publications. And they do blend so nicely together.
Yes.
That, one will build a foundation for the other one. As we've seen in our conversations there, everything is so interconnected between us. So I would just, I think that it was brilliant to list those, to make those available to people so that they can start this journey on their own, and then join us on all of these different trainings that we are putting together.
Yes, for the conference for sure. And before Gina, provides us with her commentary and maybe some final thoughts as well, is I wanted to go back to sharing why having these in great abundance, and actually Brenda provided the perfect segue to talk about that. To talk about that is that because they're short form publications, they don't really take long to go through. They provide the prompts and trigger mechanics for leaders to start bringing out more of their light and their truth, and being able to witness their process. But because of where we are, and this is about a holistic experience, you really do need all of what we've shared. and some may not be able to get all of those, find what really does resonate with you, in the moment. But I will say, as Brenda mentioned, in a sense, this does expedite one's evolution through going through this process, is that when you have a great number of these types of resources, yes, it's your sky is your limit. You're going to thrust yourself into new dimensions and be prepared and very effective in this newer expansion. And this is a lighter, gentler, easier way to do the inner work without necessarily having to have the extensive contrast of wake-up calls, and different things. And so, as Brenda even has, the publication on the wake-up calls, you get everything that you need within this context. And by the time you sync up with the conversational training conference that we're going to be doing, you're going to be more than prepared for the level of what we're going to be delivering. That's one of the reasons why we're doing calls to lead up to this, is to get people prepared for the vibration and frequency of what we're going to be providing. Thank you again, Brenda.
You're welcome.
Okay, it's been great. So Gina, turn it over to you.
I would say to anybody who's listening to this, you have found this recording for very good reason, that you are being offered a way forward that breaks things down into manageable bite-sized chunks that will enable you, if you take it on board and if you engage with it wholesomely, wholeheartedly, and that you take ownership of the process, you will be incredibly well placed. You will be part of the new energy. You will be part of the solution. You'll be part of the future. And I would urge you, if you are listening to this, not only is it vital that you take action consistently, but also you let other people know, because we need leaders who are going to illuminate the way forward to help the masses who are at the moment completely oblivious that there is a new way.
Right.
You have a role to play, which is bigger than just you. But that role is about being the biggest and best version of you. And I'm not talking about eating lots of donuts to be the biggest version of you. I'm talking about allowing yourself to be the best version of you.
Yes.
One who is absolutely in tune with source and the divine spark within you. And one that recognizes that as an individual, you have an incredibly important role to play. But also collectively, these new Illuminate leaders are going to lead the world into a much better place. We need you, but it's no time to faff about, to delay. Take action now and do it consistently. And just to say to both of you, AliNICOLE and to Brenda, thank you very much for what you are offering, both as individuals and as a collective. We are doing this because we truly care, and we want the best for you and from you. But ultimately, the choice is absolutely yours. So don't delay. Please take action and become a new illuminated leader who is leading from the right light. So thanks very much.